Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Tim Clauser, with the Center Square's Washington State Investigative reporter, TJ Martinell, here to talk about some more public records that TJ recently got. This time about a whistleblower making claims about alleged theft happening at the Echo Glen Juvenile Rehabilitation Center in Snoqualmie, Washington. TJ, why don't you run us through the records that you've got and what DCYF is or isn't saying in response to these?
Yeah, so I got these records. It was text messages between a whistleblower and Secretary Senn herself. So he was directly communicating with her, and he is saying, "Hey, there's major theft issues going on in this facility. I want to talk to you about it." And they ended up actually meeting twice, and he didn't really go into details in the text messages itself about what was going on. It was kept, I think intentionally vague and not going into too many details in a text message. But I did reach out to DCYF to ask them what that was about. And I didn't go into details in my emails because, part of the whole thing we were trying to do is protect the whistleblowers, from retaliation. And they really didn't want to comment. And I also have heard nothing from them since the story came out. So I didn't get a phone call or an email saying, "Hey, we saw your story. Just, let you know, we looked into it and we didn't find anything going on," or something along those lines, right? And it's not like it's not like the mafia where there's a buffer between the Don and the person on the ground, right? The button man who pushes the button. This is this is a whistleblower going directly to the top person in the state agency saying this is going on. And she's like, "Yes, I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say." So it's not like she can claim ignorance about this, whatever's going on, or if anything's going on at all. And I reached out to the state auditor's office and they said that they'd heard nothing, that they were doing no investigations. And then it was interesting. I asked DSHS's fraud division, "Is this something you guys would look into?" They said no, because apparently theft isn't fraud. Um, I'm, which is interesting, but yeah, that's pretty much what's going on right now. It's one of the things I find fascinating about this facility is it is mixed. It's a it allows boys and girls, but it also allows women. So it allows men up to 18 years old, but it allows women in there up to 25, which I thought was interesting. Why would you not just cut it off at 18 as well? But the other thing that I found interesting about this facility is there is no, they're building a fence right now, but historically it is had no fence. So
And we have seen recent escapes there from inmates.
yeah, which is not hard when there's no fence. I mean, ask East Germany before they put up the wall, right? There's a reason why they put up walls. It's to keep people in or keep people out. In this case, it's you build a wall to keep people in. The other thing that's interesting is they talk about how they've had a lot of staff turnover and retention issues because, there's not enough staff there. So they're working overtime and then they live a long ways away because of the cost of living. This facility is located in Snoqualmie, which, 50 years ago was kind of a, podunk area, rural area, but now it's like every part of Western Washington. A shack costs $1 million or something like that. So it's a high cost of living. So you got to live a long ways away unless you're making, you're getting a good salary. And by good salary, like well over six figures in that regard. So I just thought it was interesting that I haven't heard anything from DCYF, and we can always reach out again. This story is developing because we've just to tease for the viewers, we've gotten more information since the story came out. So there will be more phone calls and emails to different state agencies that may have known that this was going on and didn't act on the information that was provided.
What else can you share about the records that you got, TJ? Because I understand you got some more information, but that you're trying to protect the identity of the whistleblower. I mean, it was Secretary Tana Senn, the secretary of the state agency, was she engaging in these text messages? We know that this Tana Senn, she's the same secretary that's kind of been under fire the last few months amid allegations of potential widespread child care subsidy fraud at the state level. She hasn't really spoken to that outside of saying that there might have been overpayments, but not technically fraud. I mean, what is she saying in these texts in response to the allegations of theft at this juvenile rehabilitation facility?
Yeah, she met with this guy, and they did a second meeting, and then there was, it was moving towards like a deposition or something like that where he was going to be interviewed and have people talk to him and all that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much when the text messages stopped. We're still trying to figure out what's going on with that. But yeah, trying to get an interview with Tana Senn has been proven unsuccessful so far. I mean, she's it's almost like she's doing the Howard Hughes thing where she's, found a spot that she's gonna hide out in, and no, nobody knows where she is, but until she decides to do a meeting over Zoom. So, my hope is that she's willing to do a sit down and talk about this stuff because like you're saying, it's not just, rumors or allegations of theft at one youth detention facility. You also have the allegations of fraud within the child care subsidy program. And, we've been covering that as well. And then there's been, there's just been other issues that the amount of tort liability.
Lawsuits.
Yeah, the lawsuits that have been filed. And keep in mind, this is not a very old state agency. This was created in like 2017, I think. So it's not even a decade old, and yet it's been dealing with all this liability for the state because of stuff that's been going on. And now you've got allegations of fraud, you got allegations of theft at the facility by staff members who are covering it up. So you think one would hope at some point that she's going to come out and at least discuss these things. At the very least, just say whether or not these things are going on, or that there's been some sort of investigation of some kind. But the radio silence really allows people to just make up their own minds and come to their own conclusions. And frankly, their conclusions could be totally wrong, but based on reasonable suspicion of that the silence is not for good reasons.
Yeah, in regards to the alleged theft at the Echo Glen facility, you mentioned that based on the records that you had seen, that the whistleblower might have been deposed. I mean, in instances like that, is there likely public court records or anything that we would be able to obtain that would show what was discussed during the deposition, whether or not the claims were substantiated, or what the state or whatever attorneys were involved with
Yeah.
this might have pressed them on?
I mean, that's going to be probably the next step to look into stuff. I mean, the fact that the state auditor's office hasn't done anything really, me, it kind of puts things in a bad position either way, because either things didn't happen or they did look into it, or it did happen and no action was taken. And so again, we're not talking about the youth in the facility stealing stuff. We're talking about staff committing the theft and then covering it up. So this is and then potentially you could have instances where higher ups above them were also covering it up. And then there's, potentially, God forbid somebody was telling this state auditor's office that this was going on. They're like, yeah, we're not going to do an audit. I mean, that's the problem with when there's something illegal going on, and the cover up is usually always worse than the crime itself. So that's where things are going to get a little interesting, if there was in fact theft going on, because then it's a question of, well, who knew, when did they know, and what action did they take, if any?
And what was the theft? That's something that we'll need to find out as well. I mean, there could be theft could mean a wide range of things. We could be talking about maybe there's a safe in a back room and they're taking money off the top, or we could be talking about someone in an office stealing 2,000 paper clips that cost DCYF $100. I mean, it could be a wide range of things. Um, do we have any sort of idea what allegations we're looking at here?
I think based on what new information I've received is that it's effectively the facilities costs. People are using it people are spending stuff that's personal costs, and it's being passed over as costs to the facility itself. And that's the theft. It's not like it's not that they're stealing stuff in the facility. It's that they're using the facility as the basis to buy or purchase things that have nothing to do with me running the facility, but it's being passed. It's kind of like if somebody was buying something for their own personal use and they wrote it off as a work expense. right?
Like going to my employer and taking someone else's lunch out of the fridge, or taking all the toilet paper and taking it home to save you a few bucks.
Well, or imagine somebody going on a road trip of 1,000 miles and then telling the IRS that it was a work related trip when it was, you were going around chasing after some rock band's tour or something like that. I mean, that's the kind of fraud. And granted, that in that case you're committing tax fraud, but I'm just thinking more of you're spending money, like, or you're using, government funds to fill up your own gas tank or something like that. That's the kind of theft that is being allegedly has been going on.
Well, TJ, this is something that we'll be sure to stay on top of as you receive more records. Really interested to see what was said in that deposition, and whether or not Secretary Senn and DCYF will respond to these allegations. But I appreciate you covering this as always. And for anyone hoping to read TJ's stories, you can catch them at thecentersquare.com. Otherwise, thank you for joining us for another episode of Washington in Focus.